From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
When I was in the demonstration, the people around me literally had tree branches in their hands. That's what they were using to defend themselves. And it was tree branches against, 14.5 millimeter shells, against AK-47s, just against unbelievable weapons.
Voices from Libya as Muammar Gaddafi launches new assaults on the pro-democracy movement. We speak with a Libyan American who just spent a week in Tripoli with his family. Then Sharif Abdel-Quddus interviews Arab League Secretary General Amr Moussa. Will he be the next president of Egypt?
Egypt. And therefore we have to prepare for that with a vision, constitution, new faces, young people. And that's why I am really optimistic about the future of Egypt after this revolution or uprising, as you have described.
And as mass protests continue at the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin Governor Walker addresses a joint session of the state legislature today. But the 14 Democratic state senators will not be there. They remain out of state to prevent a vote on his anti-union bill. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Libyan regime has launched a new assault on the opposition amidst growing international pressure. Forces loyal to Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi tried to retake rebel-controlled towns of Zawiya and the eastern city of Misrata overnight, but both attacks appear to have been repelled. Libyan fighter jets have reportedly bombed Zawiya, and Gaddafi is said to have personally threatened more strikes unless rebels flee. In an interview with Western journalists, Gaddafi again decried the massive uprising, actually denied it against his rule, and continued to claim rebels seeking his ouster were drugged by al-Qaeda. The Libyan regime is facing growing international isolation. The U.S. has deployed naval and air forces closer to Libya in a move that would shore up a no-fly zone over his borders. The U.S. and France have also pledged to aid the opposition-controlled and take steps to freeze billions in Libyan regime assets. Speaking before the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called for Gaddafi's immediate departure.
It is time for Gaddafi to go, now, without further violence or delay. The international community is speaking with one voice, and our message is unmistakable. These violations of universal rights are unacceptable and will not be tolerated.
The United Nations says about 100,000 people have fled Libya to neighboring Egypt and Tunisia. The UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator, Valerie Amos, voiced alarm at reports of ongoing attacks on civilians.
I'm very concerned by the alarming reports of continued violence in the country. There are reports that civilians, including women and children, have been wounded and gravely injured. While there are no confirmed numbers of deaths and wounded, estimates range from hundreds to thousands.
Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has cracked down on protesters in the state's Capitol building while issuing a new ultimatum to Democratic lawmakers. On Monday, demonstrators were barred from re-entering the Capitol, the site of 24-hour protests. Thousands of people have demonstrated and slept inside the building since Walker unveiled his plan to remove the collective bargaining rights of public workers. The American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin has protested the move, calling the barring of protesters during business hours unconstitutional. The Wisconsin State Employees Union and the Wisconsin Employer Relations Commission also filed an unfair labor practices complaint against Walker yesterday, alleging he failed to negotiate in good faith. While the Capitol building remained in lockdown, Walker issued another statement threatening to send layoff notices to 1,500 state workers unless Wisconsin Democrats return to vote. The standoff in Wisconsin has extended to other Midwestern states. Ohio lawmakers are expected to vote on a measure that would strip collective bargaining for state employees as early as Wednesday. Meanwhile, in Indiana, Democratic lawmakers are vowing to remain in neighboring Illinois to prevent a similar measure from passing the state chamber. Mirroring their Wisconsin counterparts, Indiana Democrats have fled to Illinois to deny Republicans quorum. And today in Columbus, Ohio, tens of thousands of people are expected to protest in the state's capital. The White House has voiced increasing support for embattled public workers as protests have grown. Addressing the National Association of Governors in Washington, President Obama said unions are being denigrated and vilified.
So I believe that everybody should be prepared to give up something in order to solve our budget challenges. And I think most public servants agree with that. Democrats and Republicans agree with that. In fact, many public employees in your respective states have already agreed to cuts. But let me also say this. I don't think it does anybody any good when public employees are denigrated or vilified or their rights are infringed upon.
Obama's comments come as new polls show growing support for the workers in Wisconsin and nationwide. According to the New York Times and CBS News, Americans oppose curbs on public employees' collective bargaining rights by a margin of 60 to 33%. A majority of both Republican and Democratic respondents said public employees are currently paid appropriately or not enough, a rebuke of ongoing attempts to slash workers' salaries and benefits. A new poll in Wisconsin, meanwhile, shows Governor Walker would not be elected if the 2010 gubernatorial race were held again today. According to public policy polling, 52% of Wisconsin voters say they would vote for Walker's opponent if they could redo the election. A new independent report estimates the latest Republican plan to slash government spending would cost the U.S. 700,000 jobs by 2012. House Republicans approved a measure to cut federal spending by $61 billion last month, setting up a standoff with President Obama and congressional Democrats and a potential government shutdown. An environmental activist has gone on trial in Utah for preventing a mass sell-off of public wilderness in 2008. Tim DeChristopher is charged with interfering with a public auction for disrupting the Bush administration's last-minute move to auction off oil and gas exploitation rights on vast swaths of federal land. DeChristopher was arrested after he posed as a bidder and bought 22,000 acres of land in an attempt to save the property from drilling. He could face up to 10 years in prison and a $750,000 fine. On Monday, hundreds of supporters marched to Salt Lake City's federal courthouse.
I think that it's a very clear act of intimidation on their part. What Tim did was very, very out of character for not only national politics, but definitely Utah politics. And I think that it scared people. I think that it made the structures that are in power feel like people might get an idea that they have a voice in these things and we really, really could change things. We are here as peaceful uprisers to tell the world that we do believe in what Tim did, and we do believe that we have a voice and we can change things.
The security chief at Massey Energy's Upper Big Branch mine in West Virginia has been arrested on charges of trying to block a federal probe of the explosion that killed 29 miners last year. Huey Elbert Stover is accused of lying to an FBI agent and a federal inspector, as well as ordering an employee to dispose of thousands of security documents from the mine more than 9 months after the fatal blast. Stover is also accused of instructing security guards to alert workers when inspectors arrived on site. The federal government has awarded its first permit for deep-water drilling in the Gulf of Mexico since lifting a moratorium last year. Noble Energy is the first new firm authorized to drill for oil since the ban imposed in the aftermath of the BP oil spill. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers has launched a 5-city protest to demand humane working conditions for farm workers harvesting tomatoes sold inside the stores of major supermarket chains. Over 1,000 people marched on the grocery giant Stop and Shop in Boston Sunday to kick off the campaign.
We are here today in the city of Boston, focusing on our campaign for fair food that we have been waging for the past 15 years against the companies that purchase the tomatoes. Up until today, we have had 9 corporations agree to work with us. This is what we are here doing. And in this march, we are focused on Stop and Shop and Giant and other supermarkets. We want that they take responsibility and work with us to improve the working conditions that exist for us. The workers in Immokalee and the Stop and Shop and the others come to the table to meet with us. For us, as workers, this would also signify better wages.
The tour continues in New York City, Baltimore, and Atlanta before concluding in the Immokalee workers' home state of Florida. Pro-democracy protests are growing in the Persian Gulf country of Oman. On Monday, rallies spread to the capital of Muscat, while demonstrators blocked roads and continued to occupy a central square in the port city of Sohar. Omani forces have been deployed to the protest areas. Sultan Qaboos bin Said has ruled Oman since 1970. And the Iraqi government is facing criticism for a crackdown on nationwide protests. At least 29 people are dead after clashes between Iraqi government forces and protesters over the weekend. In what's been described as an effort to intimidate dissenting intellectuals, around 300 people, including prominent journalists, artists, and lawyers, were arrested following nationwide protests Friday. Some of the detained claimed to have been handcuffed, blindfolded, beaten, and threatened with execution. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy